most people never check HOMA, which shows you how efficient your beta cells are and how you can then create a HOMA-IR percentage, which is your insulin resistance percentage. I think we've sort of have some consensus there on, insulin use. I do agree, like what Kurt said. Sometimes, another area where I find some benefit to it is looking at, I guess, insulin function in women. And obviously when it comes to like PCOS, sometimes using a small amount of basal insulin to control blood glucose. If, let's say, if HbA1c is elevated and the average blood glucose is elevated with it, using a basal insulin in the background, again, it comes back to like what Kurt said. If you use basal insulin and the insulin sensitivity is poor and you don't do anything to support that insulin sensitivity, you're just causing more havoc with fat gain and whatever else.
Yeah.
But
True.
You can be a little bit intelligent knowing that if you put that basal insulin in, you're removing that sort of reliance on the pancreas having to adjust every hour to produce a level of insulin that for women with metabolic dysfunction, until you sort of correct some of the underlying inflammation, the androgen sort of dominance, the estradiol dominance, sometimes a small amount of long-acting insulin on top of like HIIT cardio, caloric restriction, reduced carbohydrate, you're just removing how the pancreas is trying to respond on two fronts, where that is every hour or after every meal. But that's not to say, similar to that, when we have a discussion like this, that every person coaching a female with metabolic dysfunction, long-acting insulin, straight away, 20 IUs, straight in.
That's what they just heard. That's what they just heard, Dean.
Yeah,
that's what they're going to do.
And that's the selective hearing side with that. You can't just build a standardized protocol like that of, use the long-acting insulin. Each person, there's merit there to utilizing that setting, but you need the background information of it. And, in terms of blood work, most people never check HOMA, HOMA, and the HOMA percentage, which shows you how efficient your beta cells are and how from the HOMA score, you can then create a HOMA-IR percentage, which is your insulin resistance percentage. You would not give basal insulin to someone with a high HOMA-IR score because they're insulin resistant. You'd want to optimize improving insulin sensitivity first, whether that is by going back to our friends, the mitochondria, doing, high intensity glycolytic anaerobic cardio in order to train that glycolytic pathway again. Doing maybe potential, reductions in carbohydrate, but also bearing in mind that it's like a double-edged sword, because when you reduce carbohydrate, you can't just reduce carbohydrate and then in tandem raise fat intake to create a calorie balance. Because when you raise fats, you're going to create insulin sensitivity problems with it, depending on the type of fat. So there's, there's a very fine balancing act here as well when you're trying to improve that IR score.
And the funny thing is, most carbohydrate sources come with micronutrients that help with insulin sensitizing pathways. So magnesium, B vitamins, right? Those are all very essential.
In nature.
Yeah, exactly. So if you reduce the carbs and you're not compensating for the lack of micronutrients that you're now having, then you're still not improving insulin sensitivity, right? Vitamin D, magnesium, B vitamins, just proper electrolyte intake, that all needs to be in place for you to have the best possible insulin sensitivity. Even iron and zinc contribute to a certain extent. So a lot of guys that think, okay, we're going to reduce or improve the insulin sensitivity by increasing metformin and then reducing the carbs, or you're not fixing anything. Yeah, just make it worse because now you're not absorbing anything.
Yeah. Well, on a basic level, what the difference between type 2 and type 1, right? Type 2 is you're insulin resistant. That's not a pancreatic issue. That's a cellular issue that they're not addressing, right? That's why we say with bodybuilders, it's generally not the pancreas that's the problem. It's the cells aren't taking the glucose. By forcing more insulin in isn't necessarily going to do what you want it to do, right? You cause more harm versus type 1, the pancreas just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's how you get a visceral fat buildup, because the insulin sensitivity is so bad that it's spilling over. So you either get fat, but with the growth hormone, you get this lipolytic process. So the body fat doesn't really go up. So taking high dosages of growth hormone and high dosages of insulin, and now all of this extra fat is just going to the visceral space. Yeah. So this is what the 90s was basically. That's just an age of insulin resistance. Basically. And some of these guys still have visceral fat buildup.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it in the guys that are now 50, 55. They still have distended stomachs. It looks horrible.
I guess the other thing from an insulin sensitivity perspective, and again, it's a whole other topic then, would be like GLP agonists, where you're just making the insulin work better, or you're making, GIP work better. And that, there's some merit there, from a hormone perspective, again, with females with PCOS or insulin resistance, using a GLP-1 agonist or a GIP agonist to help improve their insulin sensitivity from that aspect. And obviously that reduces appetite, which allows you to control, caloric intake. But, that then becomes like a perfect storm. Like, again, selective hearing, let's add, tirzepatide or retatrutide with long-acting insulin and whatever, metformin, and start chucking everything else at it. That it can't just be a standardized protocol for everyone. And that's, we've spoken even there with preps. Everyone's going to have their different way of doing things based on their biochemistry. True.
So I think, like, to bring it all back, I think there's nothing wrong with insulin if you live the lifestyle, which means you're doing the daily fasted cardio for insulin sensitivity purposes and for nutrient partitioning purposes. You're eating all those meals, 4, 5, 6, however many you need, all home cooked, following an elimination diet so it doesn't sit in your stomach. It actually digests properly. These are all nutritious meals with the proper micronutrients, and you cover whatever micronutrient deficiency you have with over-the-counter supplements to make sure that the insulin sensitivity stays the same. You don't have to change the numbers of 10 IUs or 1 IU of insulin with 10 grams of carbs. It can be 1 IU, 20 grams, 30 grams, 40 grams, whatever. I would still prefer people to start with long-acting insulin over a fast-acting insulin because there's less that can go wrong, assuming that the dosage is moderate. And if you live the lifestyle, you follow these simple steps, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but it could take you a decade before you get to that point.
That's it.
It took me 15, 20. So I started using insulin when I was about 32. So that's after almost 20 years of bodybuilding. Yep. That's when I felt I needed. Then the first 11 years was drug-free. So how much did I progress? Yeah. Not as much. But it was still 5-6 years into my drug journey, a performance-enhancing drug journey, before I added in the insulin. And before that, I tried all the steroids and the growth hormones and the thyroid medications. I did the elimination diet and blah, 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 blah. I did all the shit that you're supposed to be doing. And then I added it in, and I got great success. And I was able to go from 240 with, higher dosages to 260 with much lower steroid dosages. And I think that's what the difference is. You could just, do with less steroids.
Yep. And of course, we ended up all agreeing again.
Fuck.
Pretty much, in terms of
I hate you guys.
We'll have to do more on like religion or politics or something.
They'll probably agree also.
I think, people are waiting for us to come to a point where there's a big friction set in between us. But, I think we've been around this long enough that we see the sort of pros and cons. There is very cautious things, and especially like what we've said, the main thing not to mess with, if you do not understand it, is fast-acting insulin. Because aside from the gym, you could do it, and then that second peak hits you driving your car. And at that instance, it's not just you who's going to potentially have a problem. It could be whoever else is on the road at that time, whether it's pedestrians or other cars. So do yourself a favor and really understand, what these things are going to do in your body before you even attempt it. Like you said, Steve, you could probably do, not that I suggest, but like 80 IUs of Lantus and probably not really feel hypoglycemic. But there is always that risk. So again, starting at the very low part if you're going in with long acting to start.
Yeah, if you do 4 to 8 IUs of Humalog, it's very realistic. And how many pro bodybuilders have crashed their cars after going to the gym? Right? They don't disclose if they were using insulin, but there's a staggering amount of pro bodybuilders. Frank McGrath, for example, he crashed his car. Right? Then there's a couple other guys that actually died from this, crashing their car after the gym.
Didn't Ronnie Coleman, when he was a police officer, didn't he pass out, right? And the guy
Something
pulled over,
like that,
luckily
yeah.
saved his life. I think they're still
Yeah.
friends today.
Yeah.
Right? He was slumped over, and he asked the guy to get him some food out of his cooler.
Yeah. And I've seen it happen in my hardcore bodybuilding gym where guys are just sitting, eating their meals and slumping over. I'm like, let's get him a Gatorade. This is before I ever used insulin, you know. But I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So no, it's more common than you think, you know. So it needs to be respected, and before you build up that respect, you probably need to cycle through a couple anabolic steroids and use some growth hormone, and use some ephedrine and clenbuterol to the point you get palpitations and like, oh shit, my heart is going to explode, because the insulin's basically end stage, just like DNP and EPO. Well, they can kill you fast if you fuck it up.
Yep.
The other stupidity that I'll touch on here is telling bikini girls using carnitine, injectable L-carnitine, to take fast-acting insulin with the carnitine to help the carnitine work better.
Before
And
fast cardio, right?
I've seen this. So do your 100 milligram shot of L-carnitine and take 1 or 2 IUs and Nova Rapids and go do your cardio. And then obviously
I've done
fasted,
this, but at 250.
you know, but fasted, and obviously you'd probably understand when that symptom of hypo is coming on, that okay, I have my protocol in place here that if this does happen, Gatorade or fast acting sugar. Imagine like a hardcore bikini athlete of, yes coach, whatever you say coach, does this and then just drops off, either has an accident where they just fall off a Stairmaster or drop off the treadmill, or again, worse again, driving their car. Like,
I've only done it at home. When I did the 2 IUs fast-acting insulin before, and it's intramuscular too. But I had a glucometer with me and Gatorade, and I would only do it at home. So if I do get to a point of crazy hypoglycemia, then I know how to pull myself out of it.